Stand up and walk to Papa." The words were barely a whisper, cracked and raw, spoken by a woman who looked like she'd crawled out of hell itself. But they detonated through the silent wing of the Inzaghi palazzo like a grenade. Leonardo's finger froze on the trigger. His beretta was aimed center-mass at the intruder, this wretched creature with matted hair and hollow eyes, crouching on his son's nursery floor like a feral animal. He'd stormed in, ready to execute whoever had tripped the perimeter alarms. He'd expected an assassin from the Viper Syndicate, a rival family's soldier, a traitor within his own ranks. He had not expected this. The homeless woman didn't even look at the gun. Her gaze was fixed on something behind Leonardo, something that made her cracked lips curve into the strangest smile he'd ever seen. Half madness, half recognition, like she knew a secret the entire world had forgotten. Leonardo's blood turned to ice. He heard it before he saw it, the shuffle of small feet on Tuscan tile, the soft grunt of effort, the rustle of red cotton. Impossible. His sons, his 4 beautiful, broken sons who had spent 847 days in medical cribs, who the specialists said would never move, never see, never hear, were standing. Toddling across the nursery floor in their matching red shirts, arms outstretched, eyes bright and focused, walking toward him. Leonardo's scream tore from somewhere primal, somewhere he didn't know existed beneath all the violence and ice. The gun clattered to the floor. His hands flew to his head, fingers digging into his skull as if he could physically hold his shattering reality together. Enzo reached him first. Tiny fingers grasping Leonardo's designer trousers. Then Matteo. Then Luca and Dante, all 4 of them clustering around their father's legs, babbling sounds that weren't quite words, but carried the unmistakable melody of joy. Leonardo dropped to his knees. The beast of Sicily, the man who'd built an empire on blood and fear, collapsed on the floor of his own nursery while his world inverted itself. Behind the miracle of his walking sons, the wretched stranger remained perfectly still, watching him with eyes that seemed to see straight through his $10,000 leather suit into the hollowed-out wreckage of his soul. And Leonardo Inzaghi realized with absolute, terrifying certainty. This woman, whoever she was, whatever she was, she had just spoken 6 words that changed everything. Now she would never leave his house alive. Not because he wanted to kill her, but because he could never let her go. Before we start, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe for more Mafia boss stories like this one. Leonardo's hands shook as he locked the nursery door from the inside. The deadbolt slid home with a finality that trapped them both, the monster and the miracle worker, in a room that smelled of lavender and lies. His sons had finally exhausted themselves, collapsing into sleep on the plush carpet where they'd taken their first steps. Real sleep, not the drugged stupor Leonardo had mistaken for peace for nearly 2 years. They sprawled across each other like puppies, chests rising and falling with the deep rhythm of actual rest. The woman sat with her back against the far wall, knees drawn to her chest, watching him with those unnerving eyes. Up close, she looked worse than he'd initially thought. Her clothes weren't just dirty, they were disintegrating, held together by prayers and grime. Her cheekbones jutted sharp beneath skin that had forgotten what regular meals felt like. But her hands, Leonardo noticed, her hands were gentle as they'd touched his son's, reverent even. Talk. His voice came out like gravel. And if I don't like what I hear, you'll wish I'd pulled that trigger. She didn't flinch. That bothered him more than fear would have. There's no magic, Don Inzaghi. She pronounced his title with a strange mix of mockery and respect. just eyes that actually looked at your children instead of through them. The specialists were blind. She cut him off, and no one cut off Leonardo Inzaghi. Or paid to be. When did you last hold one of your sons? Actually, hold them, not just glance in doorways. The accusation landed like a blade between his ribs. Leonardo's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. They were fragile, compromised. The doctors said, the doctors lied. Her voice went soft, deadly soft. Or someone paid them to. Those boys aren't paralyzed, never were. They were being sedated. The word hung in the air like cordite. Leonardo felt his world tilt again, differently this time, colder. What? The formula. She nodded toward the medical cart in the corner, where pristine bottles lined up like soldiers. The special nutrition they've been fed since birth. I smelled it on their breath when I found them. Bitter almonds and something chemical. Benzodiazepines, maybe. Muscle relaxants, sensory suppressants. She spoke like she knew, like she'd seen this before. Someone's been poisoning your children to keep them compliant, invisible, forgotten. Leonardo crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed a bottle, twisted the cap, brought it to his nose. Beneath the vanilla scent, there it was. That acrid undertone he'd never questioned, because why would he? These were medical professionals, the best money could buy. The bottle exploded against the wall. Who? The beast emerged, the one he kept leashed in family spaces. Who did this? I don't know your enemies, signore. She still hadn't moved, still watched him with that maddening calm. But I know someone wanted your bloodline to end quietly. 4 heirs who can't walk, can't see, can't hear. They're no threat to anyone. They're just expensive vegetables until you die heirless. The logic was flawless, brutal. Exactly the kind of long game the Viper Syndicate would play, but that would require someone on the inside, someone with access, someone he trusted. Dr. Thorne, the family physician who'd delivered the diagnosis, who'd prescribed the special formula, who'd insisted the boys needed complete isolation and minimal stimulation, who'd been on the Inzaghi payroll for 15 years. Leonardo's vision went red at the edges. How did you know? His voice dropped to a whisper, more dangerous than any shout. How did a homeless woman breaking into my house recognize something a team of specialists missed? For the first time, something flickered across her face. Pain, old and deep. Because I used to be one of those specialists. Her fingers twisted in the rags of her shirt. Before the world took everything. Before I lost my family to men like you. She looked up, met his gaze without fear. I was Dr. Mary DeLuca, pediatric neurologist, and I watched my own children die while I was too late to save them. The name hit Leonardo like a freight train. DeLuca, the family caught in the crossfire during the Port District massacre. His massacre, collateral damage in a war he'd started over territory and pride. He'd made this saint wretched, and she'd saved his sons anyway. Dr. Thorne lived in a restored farmhouse 20 minutes outside the city, the kind of place that spoke of old money and careful investments. Leonardo's convoy arrived at 3 a.m., when the world was at its most vulnerable, when even careful men slept deeply. The doctor answered the door in silk pajamas, annoyed confusion turning to naked terror when he recognized the face in his doorway. Behind Leonardo, 6 of his most loyal soldiers materialized from the darkness like wolves. Don Inzaghi, what? Is something wrong with the boys? Leonardo smiled. It was the smile that made men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Invite me in, Herr Dottore. We need to discuss their treatment. Thorne's hand trembled on the doorframe. He was calculating. Leonardo could see it. The distance to his car, to his phone, to any weapon. But there was nowhere to run when the beast came calling at your door. They sat in Thorne's study, surrounded by medical degrees and certificates of excellence. Frauds, every one of them. Leonardo placed the nursery formula bottle on the mahogany desk between them, with exaggerated care. Tell me about this. The specialized nutrition? You know the boy's condition requires, I know what benzodiazepines smell like. Leonardo's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. I've used them myself. Very effective for making people compliant, cooperative, paralyzed. The color drained from Thorne's face like water from a broken dam. My sons walked today. Leonardo leaned forward. Walked, spoke, saw, heard. All the things you said they'd never do. Strange how quickly they recovered once someone stopped poisoning them. I can explain. Then explain. Leonardo's hand moved to his waistband, resting on the Beretta. And pray your explanation includes names, because if you're protecting someone, Dottore, you die first and they die slower. Thorne crumbled like wet paper. The Viper Syndicate had approached him 6 months before the twins were born, he confessed. They'd paid him to ensure Leonardo's bloodline ended with his generation. €500,000 to administer carefully calibrated doses that would mimic developmental disabilities. No sudden deaths to trigger investigations, just 4 tragic cases of genetic misfortune. The head nurse, Sophia, Thorne babbled, sweat pouring down his temples. She administered the doses, and Marco, your night security captain, he made sure no outsiders got close enough to question the treatment. 3 traitors, 3 people Leonardo had trusted with his sons' lives. How many know? Leonardo's finger traced the Beretta's trigger guard. How many in the Viper organization? Just Castellano, their underboss. He's the one who... The gunshot was almost polite. A soft cough that ended Thorne mid-sentence. The doctor slumped forward, blood pooling on the certificates that proclaimed his brilliance. Leonardo stood, holstered his weapon. Burn it, he told his men. Make it look like an accident. A gas leak. Something tragic. They found Sophia in her apartment, already packing. She'd seen the writing on the wall the moment the Don entered the nursery. Leonardo didn't give her the mercy of a quick death. She'd held his sons down while she poisoned them, had smiled while she destroyed their futures. She died understanding exactly what that felt like. Marco tried to run. They caught him at the border, dragged him back to the warehouse district, where Leonardo conducted his darkest business. The security captain lasted 3 hours before he confirmed every detail of Thorne's confession. Then he lasted 30 more seconds. By dawn, Leonardo stood in the warehouse's killing room, covered in other men's sins. His white shirt was ruined, his hands sticky with betrayal. 3 bodies waited for the incinerator. 3 tumors cut from his family. But it wasn't enough. His phone rang. Dante, his consigliere. The Viper's underboss, Castellano. We found him at his mistress's house. Bring him to the estate. Leonardo's voice was empty, hollowed out by rage that had nowhere left to go. Alive. I want him to see the children he tried to erase. He drove home as the sun rose over Sicily, painting the hills gold and crimson. In the nursery, Mary had already changed the boys into fresh clothes, red shirts that blazed like victory banners. They were playing with blocks, building towers and knocking them down with delighted shrieks that echoed through halls that had been silent for 2 years. Leonardo stood in the doorway, still wearing other men's blood, watching his sons discover joy. The darkness and the light existing in the same moment. The same man. He would burn the entire world to keep them in the light. Leonardo became a ghost in his own home, haunting doorways and corners, watching the miracle unfold from a distance he told himself was respectful, professional, safe. Mary didn't wear the designer clothes his housekeeper had laid out for her. She'd pulled on someone's discarded kitchen uniform instead, rolled up the sleeves, and gotten to work like the nursery was an operating theatre, and his sons were her patients, which Leonardo supposed they were. She moved through the space with methodical precision, stripping away 2 years of medical equipment that had never been needed. The feeding tubes, the monitors, the specialized chairs, all of it went into the hallway like the prison bars they'd actually been. She opened windows Leonardo hadn't realized were sealed shut, letting Sicilian sunlight flood the room for the first time since the boys were born. "They need stimulus," she'd announced that first morning, not asking permission. "Real food, music, touch, everything you've been told to deny them." The boys were weak, their muscles atrophied from disuse and drugs. Enzo couldn't stand for more than 30 seconds without trembling. Matteo's eyes struggled to focus on objects more than a few feet away. Luca startled at normal sounds, his hearing hypersensitive after years of chemical suppression. Dante moved like his limbs belonged to someone else, his proprioception scrambled. But they were trying. That's what destroyed Leonardo every time he watched from the doorway. The desperate, beautiful effort his sons poured into every small victory. Mary worked with each boy individually, then together. She'd crouch at their level, guiding Enzo's hands to grip a soft ball, praising him in that low, steady voice when his fingers finally closed around it. She'd hold picture books inches from Matteo's face, slowly moving them farther away as his eyes learned to track and focus. She sang to Luca, nursery rhymes in Italian and English, teaching his overwhelmed nervous system that sound could be gentle. And Dante, little Dante, who'd been given his father's name, she'd walk him in circles around the nursery, her hands supporting his waist, counting his steps like they were gold coins. 1, 2, 3. Bravo, amore. 4, 5. Leonardo watched it all from the threshold, never closer. On the 5th day, Mary had finally had enough. She was sitting cross-legged on the carpet with Dante, trying to coax him to walk unassisted across the short distance to a toy truck. The boy would take 2 steps, panic, and sit down hard. Take 3 steps, lose his balance, crumple. His little face scrunched with frustration that broke something in Leonardo's chest every time. "You." Mary's voice cut across the nursery without her even turning around. "Stop lurking like a spectre and come here." "I'm not." "You're terrified." Now she did turn, pinning him with those knowing eyes. Of your own children, of touching them, of somehow breaking what's already been broken. She stood, brushed off her borrowed uniform. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Leonardo found himself moving forward against every instinct screaming at him to retreat. He'd killed 3 people with his bare hands this week, had burned traitors alive, had signed death warrants without hesitation. But crossing this nursery floor felt like walking into enemy fire. He sat where Mary indicated, legs stretched out on the carpet. His $3,000 suit looked ridiculous against the cheerful alphabet mat. "Dante," Mary said gently, turning the boy to face his father. "Look who's here. Papa wants to help you walk." The boy's eyes, Catherine's eyes, the green that haunted Leonardo's dreams, went wide, uncertain. They'd lived in the same house for 2 years and were strangers to each other. "Hold out your hands," Mary instructed Leonardo, "and for the love of God, smile. You look like you're facing a firing squad." Leonardo's hand shook as he extended them. "Come here, figlio mio." Dante took 1 step, 2. His legs wobbled dangerously. 3 steps, and Leonardo could see the panic building, the boy about to give up. Then small fingers grabbed his collar, and Dante crashed into Leonardo's chest with all the grace of a drunk sailor. But he'd made it. The boy had walked to him, to his father. Leonardo's arms came up automatically, catching his son, and suddenly Dante was pressed against his heart, tiny and warm and real, and something inside Leonardo that had calcified when Catherine died just shattered. The sob came from somewhere primal, wrenching itself from his throat before he could cage it. His arms wrapped around Dante, clutching the boy like he might disappear, and 2 years of grief and guilt and rage poured out in gasping, ugly sounds that echoed off the nursery walls. Dante's small hand patted his father's wet cheek, utterly unconcerned by the breakdown. "Papa," he whispered, the word imperfect, but unmistakable. Leonardo looked up through tears to find his other 3 sons crawling toward them, drawn by instinct to this moment of rupture and repair. They piled onto him, a tangle of red shirts and little limbs, and the beast of Sicily disappeared under the weight of unconditional love he'd never believed he deserved. Mary stood back, watching the family knit itself together on her battlefield of healing. "There," she said softly. "Now you're their father." The red shirts arrived in the nursery wrapped in tissue paper, hand-delivered by Leonardo's housekeeper with a handwritten note in his precise script. "For my sons, so I can always find them." Mary held up the matching polo shirts, running her thumb over the soft cotton. 4 identical garments in a shade of red that seemed to pulse with vitality against the pale nursery walls. Crimson, defiant, alive. "He wants them visible," she murmured, understanding the symbolism immediately. For 2 years, these boys had been hidden away like shameful secrets, dressed in hospital whites and medical greys. Now their father wanted the world to see them blazing. She dressed them one by one, each boy squirming with the novelty of real clothes instead of medical gowns. Enzo giggled when she tickled his belly while pulling the shirt over his head. Matteo tried to help with the buttons and got them backwards. Luca got one arm stuck and panicked until Mary gently freed him. Dante, always the easiest, stood still and let her work, then spun in a circle when she finished, delighted by how the fabric moved. "Perfetto," she told them, lining them up like little soldiers. "Now you look like princes. They look like my sons." Leonardo's voice came from the doorway, where he'd taken to standing whenever Mary worked with the boys. Closer now than before, but never quite crossing the threshold uninvited. "Thank you." Mary glanced down at her own clothes, the kitchen uniform she'd been wearing for 6 days straight, stained with pureed carrots and finger paint, and the general chaos of rehabilitating 4 toddlers. The fabric was starting to disintegrate at the seams. "The housekeeper prepared a room for you," Leonardo continued, his tone careful. "With appropriate clothing. You should—" "I'm fine." Mary cut him off, turning back to the boys. "You're wearing rags." "I'm comfortable in rags." She didn't look at him. "Your sons need consistency, not a stranger who suddenly looks different." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Mary had spent too long in the grime of poverty to feel safe in silk. Fine things were temporary, could be taken away, made the fall back to nothing that much harder. Better to never climb at all. Leonardo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped into the nursery, fully inside, not hovering at the threshold, and the air pressure seemed to change. "I'm not asking, Dr. De Luca." The use of her title made her spine stiffen. "You've been wearing the same clothes for a week," he continued, his voice dropping to that dangerous softness that meant he expected obedience. "You smell like my son's lunch. There's paint in your hair. You will bathe, you will eat a proper meal, And you will accept the hospitality of this house. That's not negotiable. I didn't realize I was a prisoner who needed grooming. You're not a prisoner. Leonardo's jaw tightened. You're the woman saving my children, and I won't have you looking like a martyr while you do it. They stared at each other across the nursery while the boys played, oblivious to the battle of wills happening over their heads. Mary saw the implacability in Leonardo's eyes, the same iron determination that had probably built his empire. He would win this argument through sheer refusal to lose. Fine. She practically spat the word. 1 hour. Then I come back. Take 2. They'll survive without you for 2 hours. The guest suite made Mary want to weep or scream. She couldn't decide which. The bathroom alone was larger than the shelter cot she'd been sleeping on for 6 months. Marble everywhere, heated floors, a tub that could drown a person in luxury. She stood under the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing away layers of street dirt and shame. Her hair, once she got the tangles out, fell to her shoulders in auburn waves she'd forgotten existed. The mirror showed her a stranger, gaunt, yes, with shadows under her eyes that might never fully fade, but recognizably human again. The clothes laid out on the bed were simple. Dark trousers, a cream sweater, nothing ostentatious. Comfortable. She pulled them on and felt like an imposter. Dinner arrived on a tray. Real food, pasta, bread still warm, roasted vegetables, wine. Mary ate mechanically at first, then with increasing desperation, as her body remembered what nourishment felt like. Leonardo found her afterward, curled in the window seat overlooking the gardens, wrapped in the sweater like armor. He stopped in the doorway, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Recognition. He was seeing her for the first time. Not the wretched creature who'd broken into his home, but the woman she'd been before the world took everything. "You're beautiful," he said, and it sounded almost like an accusation. Mary laughed, bitter and sharp. "I'm your penance, Don Inzaghi." Don't confuse the two. But the way he looked at her said the confusion had already started. The nightmare came for Mary on the 14th night. Leonardo heard the screaming from his study, raw animal sounds that sent him running down the corridor with his gun drawn, thinking someone had breached the estate. He found her in the guest suite, thrashing in the sheets, clawing at invisible enemies. No, please! Not Sophia, she's only 7! Sophia! He holstered his weapon and grabbed her shoulders, shaking gently. Mary. Svedjati. Wake up. Her eyes snapped open, wild and unseeing. For a moment she fought him, nails raking across his forearm before recognition filtered through the terror. She went limp, gasping, and Leonardo realized she was soaking wet with sweat, trembling like she'd been dumped in ice water. When? Her voice cracked. When did you know? Leonardo went very still. Know what? That you killed them? Her eyes locked on his, devastated and accusing. My husband, my daughter. When did you know their names were De Luca? The question landed like a blade between his ribs. Leonardo released her, stepping back, and the distance felt like miles. The first night, when you told me who you were. Mary laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And you said nothing, just kept me here. Let me save your sons, knowing... She pressed her hands to her face. Madonna Santa, what am I doing? Tell me. Leonardo's voice was rough. Tell me what happened. She looked at him like he'd asked her to cut out her own heart. But something in her needed to bleed it out, to make him see what his war had cost. Port District. 3 years ago. Her words came flat, clinical, like she was reading from a medical chart. You and the Rossi family were fighting over shipping rights, tit-for-tat violence, escalating for months. My husband, Marco, worked at the docks, civilian, nothing to do with either family. He was a good man. Made me laugh. Loved our daughter more than breathing. Leonardo remembered the Port District War, remembered ordering the bombing of the Rossi family's primary warehouse, remembered not asking about civilian casualties, because casualties were the point. Terror was the currency of control. They were walking home from his shift, Mary continued, her voice cracking at the edges. Marco held Sophia's hand. She had ballet practice that afternoon and kept pirouetting on the sidewalk, making him laugh. I was supposed to meet them for dinner, but my shift at the hospital ran late. I was always running late. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. Your men planted the bomb in the Rossi storage facility on Pier 7. But the Rossis had moved their operations 2 days earlier. The building that exploded was residential now, converted apartments for dock workers and their families. 43 people died in the blast. Marco shielded Sophia with his body when the debris came down. It didn't matter. She was 7 years old and she died choking on concrete dust in her father's arms while I was 20 minutes away, saving someone else's child. Leonardo felt something cold settle in his chest. He remembered the report. The miscalculation. His consigliere had called it an unfortunate error in intelligence, and Leonardo had shrugged it off because war had collateral damage. That's what made it war. He'd never learned the names, never wanted to. I identified their bodies in the morgue, Mary whispered. Marco's wedding ring had melted into his finger from the heat. Sophia's ballet shoes were still tied on her feet. And I broke. Completely. Lost my medical license after I showed up to surgery drunk. Lost my apartment when I couldn't work. Lost everything that made me human until I was just... She gestured at herself, at the woman who'd been living in gutters. This. Mary. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't apologize. Don't tell me you didn't know. You chose not to know, because knowing would have made it harder to do again. Her eyes were ancient, holding grief that had aged her beyond her years. You want to know the worst part? When I broke into your house that night, I was looking for food, for shelter from the storm. I didn't know it was yours, didn't recognize the name Inzaghi. But when I found those boys, drugged and abandoned in their cribs, I saw Sophia. I saw my daughter dying again, and I couldn't... Her voice broke completely. I couldn't walk away, even from the children of the man who murdered my family. Leonardo stood frozen, watching this woman who should hate him with every cell in her body explain why she'd saved his sons anyway. The magnitude of her grace crushed him. I owe you a blood debt, he said finally, the words inadequate but true. My life for theirs. When you want to collect, I don't want your life. Mary looked at him with something worse than hatred. Pity. I want you to live with what you've done. Every time you hold your sons, remember the father who didn't get to hold his daughter. That's the debt you'll pay. Leonardo nodded, the weight of 43 names settling on his shoulders. He'd carry them until he died. The intelligence came through Dante's network at 6 a.m. Someone had photographed the boys in the garden yesterday. 4 toddlers in red shirts running across the lawn with a woman who looked nothing like a nurse. The photos were already circulating through the underworld's information brokers, and the Viper Syndicate had purchased them an hour ago. Leonardo crushed his coffee cup in his fist, scalding liquid running between his fingers. How many know? Everyone by now. His consigliere's voice was grim over the phone. The heirs are healthy. That means succession is back on the table. That means you're no longer a dying bloodline. That means we're targets. See, Don. I'm activating full security protocols. The explosion cut him off. The blast wave hit Leonardo's study windows a split second before the sound, shattering glass inward in a glittering spray. He dropped behind his desk on instinct, gunfire training overriding thought. His ears rang with that peculiar silence that comes after violence, everything muffled and distant. Smoke poured through the shattered windows. Leonardo was moving before his vision cleared, Beretta in hand, heading for the nursery. The boys. Mary. Everything that mattered was 3 floors away, and he was running through his own home like it was a war zone, because it was a war zone. Now, had always been, he'd just forgotten for a moment. The nursery was chaos. Mary had already barricaded the door with furniture. The boys huddled behind her against the far wall. She'd grabbed the decorative letter opener from the desk, pathetic as a weapon, but she held it like she'd use it. Her eyes found Leonardo, and something like relief flashed across her face. Everyone alive? He was already pulling them toward the hidden door behind the bookshelf, the escape route he'd built into every room that mattered. "What's happening?" Mary demanded, clutching Matteo to her chest while the other 3 boys clung to her legs. They know. Leonardo shoved the bookshelf aside, revealing the steel door. "The Viper knows the boys are healthy. We're leaving. Now." His security team met them in the underground tunnel, grim-faced men in tactical gear who moved like shadows. They reported in staccato bursts. Car bomb in the front courtyard. Leonardo's Maserati was slag. 2 guards injured but alive. No breach of the interior yet, but drones had been spotted over the north wall. "Reconnaissance," Leonardo translated for Mary, who looked like she was watching her nightmares replay in real time. "They're testing our response time, mapping our defenses. For what? For when they come back with everything they have." The safe house was 40 minutes outside Palermo, nestled in the mountains where Leonardo's grandfather had hidden during the wars of the 50s. Stone walls 3 feet thick, single-access road, sight lines for miles. Defensible. The boys cried during the drive, overwhelmed by the sudden chaos, and Mary sang to them in a shaking voice, while Leonardo made call after call, activating resources and favors and the full machinery of his organization. By the time they arrived, his declaration had already gone out through every channel. The Inzaghi heirs were under the family's full protection. Any move against them would be considered an act of war. Leonardo was drawing a line in blood and daring the Viper to cross it. Inside the safe house, Mary moved through the unfamiliar space with mechanical efficiency, setting up a makeshift nursery in the most protected interior room. The boys sensed her tension and clung closer than usual, their rehabilitation progress regressing under stress. Enzo wouldn't let go of her leg. Dante had gone non-verbal again. Leonardo found her an hour later, sitting on the floor with all 4 boys piled in her lap, rocking slightly. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the knowledge in her eyes. "This is my fault," she said. "I saved them, and now they're targets." "No." Leonardo crouched in front of her, meeting her gaze. "This was always coming. The moment I had heirs, they became threats to everyone who wants what I've built. You didn't create this. You just gave my sons a chance to survive it." "Some chance." Her laugh was brittle. "Hiding in a bunker, running from bombs. This is the life you're offering them. This is the life I have." Leonardo reached out, hesitated, then placed his hand over hers where it rested on Luca's back. "But I will burn Sicily to ash before I let anyone touch them. Or you." Mary stared at their joined hands, something complicated crossing her face. Fear, maybe, or recognition of a truth she didn't want to acknowledge. "The Viper won't stop," she whispered. "I know." Leonardo's grip tightened. "So I'll have to stop him first." Outside, his men fortified the perimeter. Inside, the family he'd thought he lost, huddled together in the growing dark. The war for his son's future had officially begun. The safe house had a rhythm that developed over days, shaped by necessity and proximity. Leonardo worked from the reinforced study, coordinating his counter-offensive against the Viper through encrypted channels. Mary transformed the main room into a therapy space, continuing the boys' rehabilitation even as the world outside prepared for war. And the boys adapted the way children do, finding normalcy in abnormal circumstances. It started with Enzo and Matteo, the way these things always start with twins. A series of clicks and hums that sounded like nonsense until Mary realized they were responding to each other. Enzo would make a pattern of sounds, click, hum, click, and Matteo would answer with hum, click, hum, and suddenly they'd both be laughing at some private joke no one else understood. Within days, Luca and Dante had joined the linguistic conspiracy. "They're creating their own language," Mary explained to Leonardo one evening, watching the boys communicate in their wordless code across the dinner table. "It's called cryptophagia, common in multiples, especially ones who've been isolated together. They're building a system only they understand." Leonardo watched his sons conduct entire conversations in clicks, hums, and subtle hand gestures. "Is it a problem?" "It's brilliant." Mary's voice carried wonder. Their brains are compensating for the years of sensory deprivation by creating new pathways. They're teaching themselves to communicate in ways that don't rely on traditional language development. Enzo clicked 3 times. Matteo hummed twice and pointed at Leonardo. All 4 boys dissolved into giggles. "What did they say?" Leonardo asked. Mary's lips twitched. "I believe they said, 'Papa looks grumpy.' You understand them? Fragments." She shrugged, but there was pride in her expression. "I watch them all day. You start to recognize patterns? Enzo's clicks usually mean questions. Matteo's hums are observations. Luca uses pitch variations for emotions. Dante," she smiled at the smallest boy. "Dante combines everything. He's the translator between them." Leonardo felt something shift in his chest, watching her with his sons. This woman who'd been broken by his violence, now rebuilding his children with a patience that seemed infinite. She wore her borrowed clothes like she'd finally accepted she belonged here, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, face animated as she narrated the boys' silent conversations. The attack came on the 7th night. Motion sensors triggered at 2 a.m., floodlights blazing across the mountainside as 2 vehicles approached on the access road. Leonardo's security team engaged immediately, gunfire echoing through the stone walls. Mary had the boys in the interior safe room before Leonardo reached the nursery, all 4 of them wrapped in blankets, eyes wide with fear, but silent in that eerie way they'd developed. The firefight lasted 8 minutes. Leonardo's men held the perimeter, the advantage of high ground and superior position. When it was over, 2 of the Viper's soldiers were dead, and the rest had retreated, leaving burned-out cars smoking in the darkness. Leonardo found Mary in the safe room after, still wrapped around the boys like a human shield. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she sang them back to sleep, the same Italian lullaby she used every night. He waited until the boys finally relaxed, their breathing evening out into sleep. Mary carefully extracted herself and followed him into the hallway, closing the reinforced door behind them. "How many more times?" she asked, and her voice finally cracked. How many more attacks before? I'm handling it. You're handling it? She whirled on him, 2 weeks of fear finally exploding. They almost reached the house, Leonardo. Another minute, and they would have breached the safe room. Your sons would have watched men with guns. Her breath hitched. I can't watch more children die. I can't. You won't. Leonardo grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. I will end this. The Viper, his entire organization. I'm dismantling them piece by piece. But I need you to hold on. I need you to keep them safe while you what? Kill more people? Create more orphans? More women like me? Tears streamed down her face. How does this end, Leonardo? How does any of this end? It ends when they're safe. His grip tightened. When no one dares threaten them again. When... She kissed him. It was desperate, furious, fueled by adrenaline and survivor's guilt, and 2 broken people reaching for something living in the darkness. Her hands fisted in his shirt, and he responded on instinct, backing her against the wall, pouring 2 weeks of tension into the kiss. It lasted 10 seconds before she shoved him away, gasping. That was... Mary pressed her fingers to her lips. That can't happen. Why? Leonardo's voice was rough. Because you killed my family. But she was still crying, still looking at him like she wanted to do it again. Because I should hate you. Because every time I look at you, I see Marco's melted wedding ring and Sophia's ballet shoes, and 43 reasons why this is impossible. And yet you're still here. For them. She pointed at the safe room door. Only for them. Liar. Leonardo stepped closer, watching her eyes dilate. You're here for the same reason. I keep finding excuses to be in whatever room you're in. The same reason I check on you 3 times a night. The same reason that Kiss felt like... Don't. Her voice broke. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. But when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. They stood in the hallway of the safe house, fingers intertwined, while his sons slept behind reinforced steel and his enemies circled in the dark. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. The Viper found them on the 15th day. Leonardo's early warning system gave them 90 seconds. Motion sensors tripping in sequence up the mountain road. Thermal imaging showing 12 heat signatures advancing in tactical formation. Not his men. Professional mercenaries, the kind you hired when you wanted a job done permanently. Mary! Leonardo was already moving, checking his weapons. Protocol 7. Now. She had the boys in the hidden basement within 40 seconds, the kind of speed that came from drilling the evacuation every day. The basement was built into the mountain itself, accessible only through a concealed door in the kitchen pantry. Steel-reinforced walls, independent air supply, enough provisions for a week. His grandfather had built it to survive artillery bombardment. Leonardo prayed it would be enough. Stay quiet, he told Mary, checking that she had the emergency phone. No matter what you hear, the panic room doesn't open from outside. They'd need explosives to breach it. My reinforcements are 20 minutes out. 20 minutes? Mary's face went pale. Leonardo, I'll buy you 20 minutes. He kissed her hard, fast, tasting fear and something else neither of them had named. Then he sealed the door and moved the shelf back into position. His security team was already in defensive positions, 3 men in the house, 2 on the perimeter. Not enough. Not nearly enough against a dozen professionals. The attack came from 3 sides simultaneously. Flashbangs shattered the windows, disorienting chaos and smoke. Leonardo fired through the haze, training overriding panic, dropping 2 mercenaries before they cleared the doorway. His men held the ground floor for 4 minutes before the invaders adapted, using suppressing fire and tactical grenades to push them back. Leonardo retreated to the 2nd floor, every step planned, using the house's architecture as a weapon. Narrow hallways, reinforced doors. Killing angles he'd mapped 1,000 times in his mind. He dropped another mercenary on the stairs, then 2 more in the hallway. His Beretta clicked empty. He grabbed the backup from his ankle holster, kept firing. 8 minutes in, Dante fell, one of his own men, shot through the throat. Leonardo dragged him behind cover, but the light was already leaving his eyes. 10 minutes, and Marco took 3 rounds to the chest. 12 minutes, and Antonio was down. Leonardo was alone, down to his last magazine, and there were still 5 mercenaries, systematically clearing the house. He barricaded himself in the master bedroom, shoving furniture against the door. Not much time left. He could hear them repositioning, preparing for the final push. His phone showed 8 minutes until reinforcements arrived. 8 minutes he didn't have. Then he heard it. Tap, 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 tap. The sound came from the pipes running through the walls, the old heating system that connected every room in the house, including the hidden basement. Leonardo froze, listening. Tap, 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 tap. It was the boy's language, the cryptophagia Mary had been teaching him to recognize. But this was deliberate, rhythmic, a pattern. Tap, tap, tap. 3 taps, 3 mercenaries. Tap, pause. Tap, 2 locations. Tap, 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 tap. 4 taps, then silence. West wall. Leonardo's breath caught. The boys were using the pipes like sonar, their hearing hypersensitive from years of sensory deprivation. They could hear the mercenaries' footsteps through the building's infrastructure, tracking movement through vibration and sound in ways normal children couldn't. His sons were giving him tactical intelligence. Tap, 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 tap. 1 man, hallway, moving fast. Leonardo positioned himself, aimed at the door. 5 seconds later, it exploded inward, and he dropped the mercenary before the man cleared the threshold. 1 shot, center mass, exactly where the tapping had promised. Tap, tap. 2 men. Tap, 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 tap. East side. He moved to the window, used the reflection to spot them approaching from the exterior stairs, waited until they were framed in the doorway, then fired twice. 2 bodies dropped. Tap 1 man. Tap, tap. Below. Tap, 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 tap. Kitchen. The last mercenary was near the hidden door. Leonardo went cold, pure protective rage flooding his system. He descended the stairs like a wraith, following his son's percussion guidance. The tapping grew urgent. Tap, 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 warning him, guiding him. He found the mercenary in the kitchen, examining the pantry shelving that concealed the basement entrance. The man never heard Leonardo approach. Leonardo's last 3 bullets ensured he never would. Silence fell across the safe house, broken only by the distant sound of approaching helicopters. His reinforcements, arriving to secure a battle already won. Leonardo pulled open the basement door with shaking hands. Mary stood at the bottom of the stairs, the boys clustered around her, their small hands still pressed against the pipes. Enzo looked up at his father with solemn eyes and tapped the pipe 1 final time. Tap, 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 tap. Safe. Leonardo descended the stairs and dropped to his knees, pulling all 4 boys into his arms. They'd saved him. His broken, beautiful sons had weaponized their trauma into survival and saved their father's life. How did they know? He whispered to Mary. She was crying, smiling through the tears. Because they've spent their whole lives learning to see in the dark. They just needed someone to teach them it was a gift. The Viper died 3 days after the siege, executed in his own compound by Leonardo's best men. They brought back his signet ring and laid it at Leonardo's feet like an offering. The message went out through every channel. The Inzaghi bloodline was restored, the heirs were untouchable, and the beast had remembered why men feared his name. The war was over. Leonardo had won. But standing in the safe house kitchen, watching Mary pack the boys' few belongings into canvas bags, victory felt hollow. She moved with efficient precision, her face carefully neutral, and Leonardo recognized the signs. She was preparing to leave. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. Her hands stilled on Dante's red shirt. "I don't know. Away. Somewhere the boys won't learn to measure their worth in bodies. They need you. They need stability." She folded the shirt with methodical care. "They need a life that isn't running and hiding and counting ammunition. You can give them that now. Hire proper nannies, therapists, teachers. People without..." Her voice cracked. "Without my kind of damage. Mary, I forgive you." The words came out rushed, like she'd been holding them too long. "For Marco, for Sophia, for all of it. I forgive you because holding on to that hate was killing me slower than the streets ever could. But forgiveness doesn't mean I can stay and watch your sons grow up to be you." Leonardo crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, catching her hands. "Then watch them grow up to be better than me. Stay and make sure they learn there's another way." "You can't ask me that. I'm not asking." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, the one he'd had his jeweler make during the siege while death circled outside. "I'm begging." Mary stared at the box like it was a weapon. "What is that?" "A choice." Leonardo opened it, revealing a ring, emerald surrounded by diamonds, the green the exact shade of Dante's eyes, of Catherine's eyes, of life itself. "Marry me. Not because of debt or obligation, because my sons chose you the moment they took their first steps, because you're already their mother in every way that matters. Because I..." The word stuck in his throat, foreign and terrifying. "Because I love you, the wretched saint who saved us all. You don't love me." But her voice shook. "You love what I represent. Redemption, penance, a way to balance your scales. I love that you sing off-key lullabies, that you eat pasta with your hands when you think no one's watching, that you learned my son's secret language in 2 weeks and can translate their clicks better than I can translate Russian." Leonardo dropped to one knee on the kitchen floor, this man who knelt for no one. "I love that you're wearing my dead wife's sweater and somehow making it yours, that you forgive me even though I don't deserve it, that you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you have no idea." Tears streamed down Mary's face. "Your world killed my family. Then help me build a different one." He took her shaking hand. "Help me raise sons who don't solve problems with bullets, who know their mother clawed her way back from hell because she loved them that much, who understand that the strongest thing a man can do is choose mercy. I'm nobody." Mary's whisper was broken. "A homeless woman with a destroyed medical license and PTSD. What kind of queen? The only kind that matters." Leonardo stood, pulling her against him. "The kind who walks through fire for her children. The kind who sees broken things and makes them whole. You've been a queen since the moment you commanded my sons to stand. I'm just asking you to make it official." Mary looked past him to where the boys played in the next room, their laughter bright and clear. Enzo was teaching Matteo a new click pattern. Luca was building a tower. Dante was, as always, translating between them all, the bridge that held them together. Her children now had been from the first moment she'd chosen them over survival. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." 3 weeks later, they returned to the palazzo. Leonardo had it stripped of medical equipment, repainted in warm colors, filled with toys and books, and everything the boys needed to be children instead of patients. The nursery became a playroom, The silent wing learned to echo with laughter. Mary walked through the front doors in a simple cream dress, no veil, no pretense. The household staff, new, vetted, loyal, bowed to her not as a prisoner or a maid, but as La Signora Inzaghi, the woman who'd conquered the beast with 6 words and 4 toddlers. The ceremony was private, just family, and Dante the consigliere as witness. Leonardo slid the emerald ring onto Mary's finger and kissed her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. Afterward, they walked into the gardens, the 4 boys racing ahead in their red shirts, so strong now, so alive. Enzo climbed a tree. Matteo chased butterflies. Luca picked flowers. Dante, always nearest his father, looked back and clicked 3 times. Mary translated, smiling. He says we're home. Leonardo pulled his wife, his wretched saint, his impossible salvation, against his side, and watched his sons play in the Sicilian sunshine. The empire still waited, dark and demanding. But here, in this moment, the beast was just a father, just a man who'd been given a second chance by the only person brave enough to grant it. Yes, he murmured. We're home. The greatest power isn't found in violence or vengeance, but in the courage to forgive, the wisdom to choose healing over hate, and the strength to break cycles that seemed unbreakable. Sometimes the people who've lost everything are the only ones rich enough to save us. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of redemption, second chances, and love that conquers even the darkest pasts. Your support helps us bring you more stories that matter. What did you think of Leonardo and Mary's journey? Drop a comment below. We read every single one.